2018. Does anyone actually remember what happened in 2017? I mean, maybe it's just the bias of this year, but 2018 has felt like one of those years that was 3 years in one. It felt like such a fucking slog that it's honestly hard to remember what even happened last year. I'm not sure if it was more of the same or just kind of bad or better. I couldn't fucking tell you. But I know this year was worse. And I figured what better way to celebrate the death of this year on New Year's Eve than to recount how much I fucking hated this year. So, strap in.
So honestly, the first couple months of the year weren't really that eventful. January, I can't even remember what happened at this point. All I know is people were eating Tide Pods, which... why did that become a thing? But I'm not here to rag on modern culture. Plenty of other channels do that anyways. So, for me, the month where things really started going downhill was April of all months, because that's when my depression hit its worst. Barely eating, barely sleeping, barely getting out of bed. Which is when I ended up missing another week of class. So 2018 was already off to a fairly good start. And then there was the whole trans thing, which, I mean, that's been a mixed bag, you know? Made some things better, it made some things worse. But, not the worst. No. What really sucked was when the semester ended. See, because that's when things got fun for me, because I lost a bit of my scholarship thanks to, among most things, depression, but also because when you're depressed and you're already a lazy person like me, it just compounds, and I wasn't smart enough to seek help despite the fact that most of my friends were like, you probably have something, you should probably get that looked at. So here we are. So my grades weren't the best, but I decided, okay, I'll just take a summer class, which was $1,500 to cover the one credit. So that was fun, but even despite the case, my parents were like, so it's clear college isn't working out, and even though we're not paying a dime for this, you're done with college. We're not going to support you, and you shouldn't be in college anymore. Basically calling the shots for me, despite a year ago saying, my future is my choice. So, and they try to keep it open ended too. They were like, whatever you want to do with your life, that's your choice. But it's clear college isn't working out. I'm like, so you're giving me options, but not. So I did the next most logical thing, and you can just imply the air quotes right there, and moved out. I crashed at a friend's place for 2 months, which thank you to that friend, because holy hell, those people were great for allowing me to just sleep on the couch for 2 months. And it's in the middle of that what we got to in the summer where my car broke down. But what was even funnier is my car broke down on the way driving to Tucson to go see a friend. That friend went and picked me up anyways, but then I was stuck down there with them in Tucson. So another friend came and got me, and I stayed at their place. Again, great people. I love my friends, mainly because they're willing to drive several hours to get me, but hey. Yeah, it turns out with the car, the radiator busted. Which means it couldn't regulate the car temperature, which means the engine then overheated, and when it died, the engine warped. So, my car is still sitting in the parking lot right now. It's been like 6 months, and I haven't done anything about it. Like, I need to sell that thing for parts, if nothing else, and yet here we are. So, yeah, that was the summer, and honestly, that was both the best and the worst time, because I spent a lot of money trying to secure a rent and a place, and it worked, and my grades also went up thanks to that summer class I retook, but holy hell, I was basically at $20 total, and I get that for most people, that's a normal thing by this point. For me, it's a matter of, I'm 19, 2 months ago I had around $3,000, and now I'm down to 20. Some of it due to poor spending decisions on food, but most of it due to setting up my life and the fact that I didn't have hours at work. I tried looking for a summer job. It did not pan out. For whatever reason, people don't want to hire you for 2 months, and I can totally understand that. So it was a matter of trying to secure hours, which didn't happen. So then we get on to the school semester, which started off okay until my medication went up, and so suddenly I was without my antidepressants because prices went from $9 to $50 a month. So that was completely great. And then we got to the roommate for this place that I was living in that was empty for 2 months. My roommate finally moved in. So I'm just going to call this guy Chad because I'm not really willing to think of a better name for this guy. He already had a typical frat guy name, but, good for the guy. He went to rehab. He apparently got clean. And addiction's a hard thing to beat. I don't know much about it. I just know it's not an easy thing to overcome. But to say you went to rehab and got clean when it just means you're clean of hard stuff and you're still doing the more recreational drugs like marijuana and alcohol, that just seems a little bit weird to me. But the drug thing wouldn't have been a problem. It was the fact that this guy was a complete asshole on so many levels. The thing that did it for me with him, because I could go on about this and I'm not going to, was the one night he decided to handle a loaded firearm drunk in our kitchen to show off to his friends. And that's when I walked out the next day after having been up most of the night because I couldn't fall asleep thanks to him and all his drunk friends. And promptly stayed at other people's places for the entire next week while I lined up a new place for rent. I found a much better roommate. She's great. And that's where I am now. So in the same month that I went off my antidepressants, I also had to deal with this new person moving in. And the thing is, he had been sitting on the lease for 2 months, as in he hadn't paid rent for 2 months, but they still let him stay on because he promised to. And he finally did, and then just up and moved in. And he turned out to be a complete asshole, and he was the reason why I could not find a roommate. Luckily, with the way this place works, the rent is per room, not per complex, so he wasn't necessarily driving my rates up, but yeah, a bit of a dick, especially when I found out that it was not just my place he was doing this, it was 2 other places where he was waiting to figure out which one he wanted to go to, and it was with his parents' help. I'm like, wow, I'd like for my parents to help me out with that amount of money that I could just sit on 3 separate places before actually moving into one and making up my fucking mind. So, yes, the story of Chad, my former roommate. Yeah, see, when I sat down to start all this, I thought it would be a lot worse. There were so many little things that went bad this year, and just by covering the broad strokes, it doesn't really do it justice to most of the things that happened. Hell, I may sound like a whiny teenager, which to a lot of extent I am, but I'll put it this way. I started this year a little bit worried about grades. Living in a dorm, and, that was it. Maybe a little bit of issues with depression, but that was the start of my year. We ended the year with me living my own place, paying my own rent, having to basically stop talking to the last set of parents I had because they decided that my future was theirs to control, and I've basically been fighting to stay in college on my own. So I went from having a decent amount of money to being flat broke because that's what independence does. And it's funny because 1, it changes your perspective a lot. 2, it's made me a hell of a lot more cynical. And 3, it's also made me realize that, I am a lot smarter than I thought, but also a lot more of an idiot in certain aspects. Again, I have a car that I could sell for parts, but I haven't done it yet. So yeah, it's been a hell of a year, and honestly, 2018 can go die in a hole. Happy New Year, everyone.